Hey my good friends, Sam Haymart. For Test Driven TV, the stars have finally aligned. I have test driven two vehicles that are directly comparable, and best yet, I've tested them off-road, that being the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 and the Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro, both driven on the very same off-road course. And we're going to put those two videos together side by side and talk about what makes these trucks better in different areas. And at the end of the video, I'm actually going to tell you which one I think is the best. It's time for a face-off. Okay, before we get to the videos, I want to make sure I put it out there clear and crisp and absolutely without doubt. So don't comment on this later and go, oh, you didn't really compare these two trucks. These are vehicles I test drove at two different times, okay? Two different videos, and you can see both of those videos linked at the end of this and down below in the information section if you want to watch the entire off-road test individually on each truck. But what I've done here is I've taken these two videos on the same course and we put them together in a way that you can see how they compare side to side. So that's what you're looking at here, okay? I didn't get a chance to put these two trucks in the same place at the same time. The stars align for me it's not quite that good, okay? But it's almost the same thing. So I'm just letting you know that right up front before we get started. So without further ado, let's get to what these vehicles are about. All right, my friends, let's get started here with the Colorado. Quick walk around. What we've got right here is the ZR2, which means quite a bit visually. Right up front, you can see we've got a completely different front fascia, different bumper. And what they've done here is they've cut away this bumper so that you can crawl up over rocks with those tires without bending your bumpers or getting into the brush and things like that. It's kind of a nice visual statement, but it's also functional. Down below, big aluminum skid plate there, and that's a nice thick aluminum one. That's not some cosmetic piece. That will actually protect the engine and a lot of that lower apparatus from the rocks and things like that. We've got a unique grille. In the case of the wheels, we've got 17-inch alloy wheels with Goodyear DuraTrack tires. Now these wheels, because we have the dust package, are colored this way to go with the rest of the sort of dusky blackout theme here. On the hood, we've got an insert, as they call it. It's not exactly a hood scoop, it's just kind of a visual insert. It says Duramax up there, of course, because we do have the 2.8 liter Duramax turbo diesel here, 186 horsepower and 369 pound-feet of torque. That's huge. Lots and lots of torque. Going around the side, this has rock rails on it, as you can see there. Those are going to protect us against bottoming out over rocks and things like that. And as we said in our first video when we actually reviewed this for the first time, those are actually bolted to the cab structure, not the frame. So they actually offer a little bit more flexibility when the truck twists. As you can see as we go around the back, this also has that big light bar. Now that's not a roll bar, that's a cosmetic light bar. The lawyers wanted to make sure you didn't think that was going to protect you in any way, shape, or form. It is a very cool looking piece, and of course there's big lights mounted on top of it, but if you notice, those things are actually awfully close to the cab, and what I found out is they actually do a much better job at lighting up the cab than they do anything else at night. But if you own this truck, you could probably raise those things up just a little bit with some spacers or something like that. Lastly, back there in the bed, this has the optional spare tire mount. That looks really cool. That's like adding a couple of extra testicles to this truck, maybe an extra inch. But it completely gets rid of your bed space. It makes it completely useless back there, but it looks awesome. Looks awesome. And of course, it presents your spare tire and wheel right there for anybody who wants to steal it. Well worth the $500, and that of course is a dealer installed accessory because, again, the lawyers don't want you well, suing GM in case something goes wrong with it. This has a very unique grille. It has a very retro look, very reminiscent of the Land Cruisers back in the 60s and 70s with the Toyota lettering right across it. Headlights, though, on this one, they're actually not exactly the latest, greatest technology. These are projector beam headlights, but they do have LED driving lights. Down below in the bumper, they've worked with Rigid to create some Rigid branded LED fog lights. The big money, really, if you look down under the bumper, that is that skid plate, a big thick aluminum skid plate, not only stamped, but emblazoned with color, that TRD Pro logo. I think it looks pretty sexy, especially when you're sort of underneath it and it's coming up on you. Hood scoop element. You'll notice the graphics on this truck, something not exactly seen in the brochure. This is an optional accessory that comes in at the tune of $699, the TRD Pro graphics package. Looks very cartoony, very Transformers, very Marvel. I like it. It's a lot of money, but I think it really adds to the truck, particularly back here on those rear quarters. That's something you can see from across the parking lot, and along with these nice emblems on the doors, really sets this truck apart visually. Wheels, 16-inch alloy wheels. They're black TRD, unique to this truck. Goodyear Wrangler tires with Kevlar. That really helps them be strong when it comes to getting over sharp rocks and things like that. That's what they're for. And lastly, this thing sits a little bit higher. We've got TRD springs with a 1-inch lift in front, Fox internal bypass shocks, big 2.5 inches, nice and thick and meaty. You can put your hands around them. And that really helps with the ride and some of the handling off-road, and that's really what big thick ones are for. It's all about the handling. And down here on the lower part of the truck, you can see these running boards. Now, these appear from a distance, they might be rock rails. Now, the Chevrolet ZR2 Colorado has rock rails standard. This does not. These are just tube steps. So you don't want to pretend these are rock rails and scrape them over rocks, because they're not going to protect you, but they do look very nice. They do help getting in and out of the truck. They're rubbery and grippy. And at the rear of the truck, again, you can tell that this is indeed the TRD Pro. There's the logo there. This also has the set-in lettering option, so instead of just the indented, you've got the sticker emblems there, which looks kind of sexy against this color, voodoo blue. So there you have it for the walkarounds. My first blush here is that the Chevrolet Colorado ZR2 offers a little bit more in the way of equipment than does the Toyota. And we're talking about things like the rock rails, standard rock rails that are functional. Also, it's got a wider track, it's got bulgier fenders, and it's got that bumper that cuts away. And so it's got some functional design elements in it that really give you a little bit more in the way of capability out there, or at least not worrying about tearing your truck up so much. And also, I think the suspension on the ZR2 is a little bit more comprehensive. Those dampers and some of the extra suspension bits, the unique rear axle, the lower control arms on the front, they've really gone the extra mile to give that truck a little bit extra in the way of equipment than the TRD Pro has. But now it's time to see how these things actually perform up on our off-road course. All right, so here we go. Now this first segment here is a rock face. It's pretty steep. I call it the wall. First thing I'm noticing here is that this diesel engine with its 369 pound-feet of torque is so awesome here. I just have to roll into the throttle ever so lightly, and it just goes. It just crawls up this hill effortlessly. Now, the gas engine, the V6, will do this just fine, but you just have to lay into the throttle and rev it out. A little bit more drama. This is really what I like about the diesel as the engine choice for this truck. So going up here, this thing actually just shifted into second gear, and we're only going 5 miles an hour. But this hill, what this has is, it's pretty well packed dirt, but there are a lot of big rocks that like to roll around and get out from underneath you. And it does require a lot of suspension articulation, and that gets us to where this truck really shines above and beyond the Z71, is it has some extra suspension lift. We've got a little bit of an extra wider track, but most importantly, we've got the DSSV dampers. Now these are really exotic, expensive shock absorbers, and you can see there that there's multiple chambers on them, and there's actually even kind of a hot guy in the artwork there. No, I didn't say that, I'm just saying. I did say it, didn't I? Nonetheless, very expensive shocks, and they're basically designed such that this truck can have different shock settings depending on what's going on with the suspension travel. And so they can be very compliant, or they can be very stiff depending on what you're doing with the truck and how severe you're going along. Now right now we're just crawling straight up this hill, and I've been able to talk and have this conversation with you, which means it's been pretty darn effortless so far. The main thing here as we start getting up here is a lot of articulation is necessary with the suspension, because we get into some pretty steep moguls here. As I'm watching the rocks under me. There we go. Easy sleazy. One of the big things you get out of that is the fact that it makes it so much easier to pick a line through some of these challenging and technical spots. You don't have to be quite as careful about some of the things you would be otherwise. Uh-oh. We need the locker. Okay, so I'm going to put this in neutral here, and I'm going to reach down, and I'm turning that on. The light's lit up, and now I can put this back in drive, and that's all it took. That's what the locker's for. Now, we're not going to need the front locker here very unlikely because it just isn't that technical. But that's what that's for. If I were to get to a spot where I just didn't have enough traction in the back and I didn't have enough traction in the front and I needed one wheel up there to pull me forward, that's what that's for. And the Toyota TRD Pro does not have that front locker. Now, a lot of people would say, well, not a big deal. It has their software system, which works very well. I would also say it's a good thing. The difference is you've got solid mechanical locking here, and that enables you to put all the power to both wheels. When you have a software system like Toyota has, that actually applies the brakes to one of the wheels that's spinning and then forces power to the other side. So you're not getting full power to both sides. You're squeezing power back and forth, and ultimately it's a compromise. You just don't have that raw full power. So that is one of the benefits of a true mechanical locker over a software locker. Just a technical point there. So I got to tell you, we're getting here to the top of our quick little rock crawl, and this is the most time I think I've spent talking to the camera doing this in any vehicle that I've driven up this. It's that easy, and that's really what I like about this truck, is it makes the act of technical rock crawling or off-roading something to have a conversation through. So that's pretty cool. Now this is a really steep, just a nice rock face that doesn't have anything loose on it. And when I put this down in 4 low, what that does is it gives us that low gear ratio for climbing that works very well. And even with the V6, which has a pretty low amount of torque, 265 pound-feet to be exact, not a lot of torque here from this 3.5 liter V6. 273 horsepower though. The V6 gas that's in the Colorado does have more horsepower and torque, so this is the lesser on that wavelength. But getting to what we're doing here, this is a really nice tight spot. A lot of moguls and rocks that you really sort of have to navigate through here. So this extra ground clearance that this has really comes in handy. A lot of suspension articulation. One thing I'm noticing here is I'm getting some creaking in the suspension as this thing twists. 1-inch lift in the front, progressive rate springs in the back, and these Fox 2.5-inch internal bypass shocks. The thing about off-road shocks though is that, you know, you've got to tune them someplace. You got to tune them for off-road, or you got to tune them for working on the pavement. And I think what they've done is they've sort of gotten a compromise here, because these are still pretty stiff. They feel like street shocks to me, but they do have that extra travel that's available. Now we're in a little bit of a challenging spot here, so I'm taking it easy. This truck is very maneuverable. The steering's got a pretty heavy weighting on it, but there's a lot of steering feel. You can feel when you need to let it sort of pull itself like that. Whew. Now this hood scoop's pretty cool. It definitely looks cool, but one thing I don't like about it is it makes it a little bit more difficult to see what's in front of you. It's a little bit of a hindrance, I think, in that way. Okay, this is where I want to be. It's always challenging to pick a line through this one particular spot. Get it just right. There we go. Now, we've just gotten ourselves in a spot that is why that rear locker exists. The rear wheel, as you can see, is hanging off. Even with all the articulation the suspension has, it's hanging in a spot that just doesn't allow it to have that traction. So luckily we do have one. I just need to shift this into neutral, reach up here and press the button. And now the indicator light is on. I've got rear lock, and see how easy that works? It's like pressing the magic button. It is the magic button. When you put this in 4 low, one of the things that happens is the computer manipulates the throttle such that it makes it less sensitive, so it's more easy to sort of manage when you're going through a tough spot like this, so you're not hitting a bump and hitting the throttle and causing this thing to goose. And it makes it easier to sort of modulate your speed in these spots and keep it going. Now there's also the crawl control that this has, where you can set it at a speed and just take your foot off the gas and the brake and it'll control your speed no matter what. That's really great for mud and certain other situations. I'm one of these old-fashioned guys. I just don't like that. I like to be able to stop when I want to and go and have that control. All right, so that was really the challenging part. What does it prove? It proves the truck's capable. That rear locker is a lifesaver. That's something that any serious off-road vehicle should have. I will point out though, Chevrolet Colorado has a front locker. This does not. Now this has a software system that can enable that to work when you use some of the traction toys, but it's not a true locker. So I think both trucks actually perform quite well, and as you look at those individual test drives, if you do later, you'll find that I was actually pretty happy in both cases. But I gotta say, once again, the Chevrolet Colorado has some advantages here. That front locker, I cannot underscore enough how important that is if you're looking at which one of these trucks has a little bit more capability. There was one spot where we tested the rear locker with both of these trucks, and if you look closely at the video we have for our Toyota Tacoma, you can see that in that same spot, the front wheel was spinning a little bit and there was no way of arresting that. Now, had the rear axle not been enough locked to get us out of that spot, say if there wasn't enough traction back there, I would not have been able to push more traction to those front wheels, or at least that spinning front one, whereas in the Chevrolet, I could lock the front and the back, and I would have been able to get out of a tight spot like that maybe a little bit easier. Now that's not to say that you couldn't get out of that spot in the Toyota, you just have to work it a little more, that's all. So I just think that front locker is a very nice thing to have, and it's an easy thing to offer. I don't know why Toyota just doesn't cough one up, or at least offer one as an option. They have their software system that you can engage that can work the brakes on that. That is an option, but it's just not a true locker. Also, those DSSV dampers and the suspension articulation, I think, a little bit more superior in this area. And lastly, the engines. You know, Chevrolet offers two engines, not just one, the diesel, which I had in my tester, as well as the V6. Now, some of you out there might say, well, it's not fair testing the diesel against the gas Toyota. We're not really talking about high performance and acceleration here, so I don't think. But what I will say is that diesel as an option is very important to me. I would buy that truck that way because it offers torque for crawling up hills and doing things that you have to really push a gasoline engine a little harder to do, whether you're in the Chevrolet or in the Toyota. That said, Chevrolet offers more horsepower and more gears in that V6 than does Toyota with you know, the 3.5. So I think that the powertrains, either one of them in the Chevrolet Colorado, are superior. So I think you're probably sensing where this is headed, but we still have one more area to test, and that is the trail ride, where we're going a little bit faster and seeing how these trucks feel. So what we're doing now is we're taking a little bit quicker ride down the trail and sort of experiencing a different mode of the suspension and this overall structure of this truck. And one of the great things about these DSSV shocks is because of the way they're tuned, they're stiff when you need them to be stiff, like on the highway when you're going at speed and you don't want that soft off-road truck feel. But when you're out here off-roading, you've got that soft off-road truck feel. You can actually go at a pretty good pace out here on a really rocky, rough, rutted road, and it doesn't beat you to death, and it feels comfortable. And I've driven a lot of trucks that do exactly that. In fact, dare I say it, the Toyota Tacoma TRD Pro is one that you've got one setting on that suspension all the time. And it tends to be, in my opinion, a little bit compromised for the highway, but still a little bit of a compromise out here to where if you really start going fast enough, it'll beat you to death. And I'm starting to put some speed, woo! That's some speed on this. And you can tell that, you know, it does get a little bit rough, but it's comfortable. One of the other great things here is the structure on this truck is very stiff, which means I'm not getting a lot of rattling and shaking in the structure and in the interior. So it's a solid truck. It's got that nice solid frame underneath. I'm not getting shaking in the door frames. You might be seeing shaking there, but that's my camera bouncing up and down. I like it. Now, this section of our drive really kind of gives me a good thumbnail on what these shocks and springs are like. What do they make this truck like driving out on a rocky trail? Ooh, well, ooh, dang. They're pretty stiff. That's really what I'm getting out of this. This thing is very stiffly sprung in these shocks.
don't have a lot of the marshmallowy compliance that I typically like to have in an off-road vehicle. Something I found in the Chevy Colorado ZR2 is it was very compliant in this particular section. It wasn't really jarring in its ride. This I tend to find, not only is it stiff, but because this frame and the design of this truck tends to be a little older, I'm getting a lot of shaking and rattling in this structure, a lot of rattles here, even with this four-door cab. Now, that doesn't take away from its capability. It's still rolling along through this rough trail pretty good. You just feel every single, you're just feeling it. I'm feeling it. I'm feeling every bump. Woo. Ah. But, you know, if you're willing to be a man and take it, you can go as fast as you want. The truck will do it. Woo.
So that gets us to what do I think, which one of these trucks do I think are better? Well, I think you figured that out by now. I really do believe that the Chevrolet Colorado offers more equipment for the money. It offers more capability for the money. And frankly, I just think it looks hotter. It's got a lot more stuff on it that's, you know, it's got the look, it's got the personality. And the thing is, there's going to be two camps here. There's going to be the people that say Toyota just doesn't care. They don't give us anything in terms of updates, the latest, greatest. They don't give us all the hardware. Chevrolet's got it all. And that's kind of where I'm at with this truck. There's going to be people that say Toyota's more reliable. It's got higher resale value. And those people would be right. If you want to use the Consumer Reports version of your off-road toy, Toyota's the one to get. But if you want to have an off-road toy that might be more fun to play with, it's a Chevy. And you know, where I come on vehicles like this, and I've bought a lot of vehicles that were high-performance vehicles in my lifetime, and reliability and resale value weren't high on the list, okay? I bought what looked good, drove good, and made me feel like I was going to have fun with it, and that for me is a Chevrolet Colorado. It just offers more capability and equipment for the money. And the secret is it's probably going to be a vehicle you can get a better deal on at the dealership, because Chevrolets, discounts. They're offering discounts on this truck. You can get pretty good discounts. I've heard tell. Toyota dealer, they're going to flip you the bird and tell you you're going to pay MSRP or you can go buy the Chevrolet. That's just kind of how it goes, because Toyota's a Toyota, you know. So there you go. I've come down and taken a side, for better or for worse. Now, if you want to see a more detailed video on each one of these trucks, my full test drive off-road tests are right there. Colorado, Toyota, you can see a lot more detail. Either way, stay tuned.